This story of survival in an apocalyptic world kicks off with a harsh betrayal. The protagonist, Zhang Xiaoyang, finds himself suspended precariously above a cage packed with ravenous zombies. As if the situation wasn't dire enough, his ex-girlfriend sneers at him, taunting him about the deaths of all his friends. Her mockery reaches its peak as she assures him that his pathetic life is also nearing its end, soon to be just another addition to the carnage below. As Xiaoyang reflects on his misfortune, guilt and regret gnaw at him. He curses himself for trusting this treacherous woman, someone he now believes deserves a fate far worse than his. In her eyes, however, Xiaoyang's threats are meaningless. She's moved on to a wealthier, stronger man, and tasks him with disposing of her former lover. Her new partner, a corpulent man named Li Shuxiong, eagerly agrees to the plan. He even suggests dragging out Xiaoyang's torment for her amusement. Before pushing the button that would seal Xiaoyang's fate, Fatty smugly thanked him for his generosity, gloating about the supplies they'd looted from him, which would keep them comfortable for months. With that, Xiaoyang was sent plummeting into the zombie pit. The frenzied zombies, driven by an insatiable hunger, swarmed Xiaoyang instantly. As agony overtook him, he clung to a desperate thought. If he could live his life again, he would make both Jing and Li Shuxiong pay dearly for their betrayal. Suddenly, Xiaoyang jolted awake to the grating sound of Jing's voice. She was nagging him, demanding to know why he hadn't added her name to the deed of his house. For a moment, he was disoriented. Was this a dream? Had he somehow gone back in time to before the apocalypse? Memories of his previous life flooded back. Jing had conned him, stripping him of his parents' inheritance and leaving him homeless. Shortly after, the apocalypse descended, unleashing a global catastrophe that turned humans into mindless, flesh-hungry zombies. Despite the chaos, Xiaoyang had managed to survive thanks to his resilience and the help of loyal friends. Together, they established a safe haven, fortified and well-stocked, where they could live without fear of the undead. But just when things seemed stable, Jing returned, feigning desperation to win his sympathy. Xiaoyang, blinded by her deception, let her in, only for her to betray him once more. She sabotaged the safe zone, allowing their enemies to breach the gates, leading to the destruction of everything they'd built. Now she was back, demanding an extravagant bride price and the deed to his home, as if her betrayal had never happened. This time, however, Jing was determined to take control. Though he kept his anger in check, he knew he needed a careful plan. Giving in to impulsive emotions could jeopardize everything. After pretending to agree to her demands, he sent Jing away, leaving her stunned at his newfound confidence. And used to being defied, she couldn't understand how her obedient slave had suddenly become so assertive. With Jing out of the picture, Xiaoyang could finally focus. He had a month left before the apocalypse struck, and every second was precious. He vowed to prepare thoroughly this time, ensuring that no betrayal or misstep would threaten his survival. Then something unexpected happened. A system notification popped up, resembling a video game interface. Xiaoyang discovered he had activated an apocalypse system, which came with missions designed to help him survive. His first task was titled Apocalypse Preparation, requiring him to secure a piece of land and stockpile enough supplies for a year. Completing the mission would earn him 10 points, which could be exchanged for valuable rewards in the system store. Our protagonist was thrilled with the unexpected perk, the system's missions and the rewards that came with completing them. What more could one ask for? However, the system store's offerings remained a mystery to him. It mostly stocked loot boxes and potions, such as those for boosting physical strength. Yet, his musings were interrupted by the loud growling of his stomach, reminding him he needed a proper meal. Reflecting on his past life, Xiaoyang recalled how he used to pinch every penny, starving himself to save for Jing's bride price. But things are different now. Determined to indulge, he decided to treat himself to a luxurious meal. With the impending zombie apocalypse just a month away, he figured he should enjoy the finer things while they lasted. A few hours later, his delivery arrived. Xiaoyang marveled at the sight. It was a legendary Michelin 3-star takeaway. Never in his wildest dreams could he have afforded such a thing before. He eagerly dug into the $300 braised pork, savoring every bite. After surviving on scraps during the apocalypse, the taste was heavenly, almost surreal. But Xiaoyang didn't stop there. He went into full food enthusiast mode, devouring dish after dish. His appetite seemed insatiable, and he nearly polished off everything when his phone rang. The caller, Xiaoya, Jing's friend. It seemed Jing had wasted no time complaining to her. Xiaoyang reluctantly answered, only to be greeted by an ear-splitting tirade. Xiaoya berated him, questioning how he could dare to treat Jing so poorly. She insisted Jing was merely testing his love, and claimed he had failed miserably. If he truly loved her, he'd prove it by handing over the deeds to his house and 1,000,000 yuan in cash as an apology. Xiaoya even offered to mediate with Jing if he complied. If not, he could expect a breakup. Xiaoyang's patience snapped. Who did she think she was to test him like this? Furious, he told her off and ended the call. He was done with greedy women who only cared about money. His priority now was to secure a suitable piece of land. He envisioned building an impregnable fortress, easy to defend and strategically located near water and forest. The following morning, Xiaoyang visited a real estate agency. A friendly consultant greeted him, asking if he was looking to rent or buy. Xiaoyang confidently replied that he was after something more valuable. Just then, the sales manager, Zhu, appeared and briskly ordered the consultant, Xiang, to help unload boxes of toilet paper. Despite Xiang's protest that she was assisting a customer, manager Zhu dismissed Xiaoyang outright, deeming him a broke nobody in shabby clothes who wasn't worth their time. The manager's arrogance irked Xiaoyang, who decided to put him in his place. He asked Zhu to repeat his words and explain his audacity in belittling others. Zhu, unfazed, doubled down, mocking Xiaoyang further. He even declared he'd eat a toilet on a live stream if Xiaoyang could afford to buy one. It was clear the manager was about to regret his words. Unbothered, Xiaoyang smirked and advised Zhu to prepare for a feast of porcelain. He clarified he wasn't here for a house, but to buy land. The announcement stunned everyone present. It wasn't every day someone came to buy land outright. Xiang quickly invited Xiang to sit, while she outlined the available options. Meanwhile, manager Zhu glared in disbelief, convinced Xiaoyang was bluffing. Xiang presented detailed listings, but Xiaoyang wasn't interested in browsing. He outlined his requirements instead. Land near mountains and running water, preferably with existing factories or large buildings. Xiang promised to check for suitable options. Manager Zhu, unable to resist butting in again, suggested a property in the eastern district. Xiang hesitated, pointing out that the area known as T, City Land, was filled with unfinished projects and abandoned factories, making it unsuitable for most buyers. Zhu dismissed her concerns, claiming no real customers had shown up anyway, and he suspected Xiaoyang was just wasting their time. Xiaoyang didn't care about the location as long as the land met his needs. He didn't mind the unfinished factories. Actually, they were a bonus, since they would save him time and money. After reviewing the details, Xiaoyang confirmed that the land was exactly what he wanted. Without hesitation, he agreed to buy it. He was ready to sign the contract and make the payment. Xiang was shocked. No one in their right mind would buy land with incomplete factories, but Xiaoyang stood firm. He even urged her to hurry up because, as he put it, someone here is eager to eat some fresh poop. Manager Zhu stood there holding the check, unable to wrap his head around what he was seeing. How is it even possible for this scrappy guy to pay 300,000 for land with old rundown factories? It made no sense to him. Before leaving, Xiaoyang had reminded him of the payment. Now, it was time for Zhu to fulfill his part of the deal. Meanwhile, other customers in the store were urging the manager to hurry up as the stream had already started. One guy whose stomach wasn't feeling too great promised to at least make it fresh for the stream. Xiaoyang had completed the first task. The next step was to figure out how to turn the land purchase into a real business by gathering supplies. As he was leaving the real estate office, an old acquaintance, Li Shuxiong, spotted him and couldn't help but wonder what Xiaoyang was up to. But all thoughts flew out of his head when he saw what was going on inside. Manager Zhu was now being pressured by the staff and customers to keep his word, all while begging for help and desperately explaining he didn't want to go through with it. Meanwhile, Jing was living carefree, painting her nails, and enjoying the quiet life. That's when she got a call from Fatty, who asked if she knew Xiaoyang had just bought land at the real estate company. Shocked, she wondered where he had gotten so much money from. Fatty speculated it was probably the money he'd saved for the bride price. Jing was furious. She couldn't believe Xiaoyang would use her money for something like that. Li Shuqiang urged her to stay calm and go talk to Xiaoyang about it, but Jing's anger was blinding. She wasn't going to ask him anything. She was going to confront him. Back at his home, Xiaoyang was deep in thought about how to fund the supplies he needed to start building. Just then, there was a loud knock on the door. It was Jing with her friend, still fuming over Xiaoyang's use of her money. Xiaoyang had no idea what she was talking about, and Jing, with fire in her eyes, accused him of spending the bride price money to buy land. She claimed that, since the money came from her, the land was hers too. Xiaoyang, stunned by her accusations, didn't know how to respond. Finally, he decided to give her a straightforward explanation. He had plenty of money, but none of it would go toward her. He also knew about her little fling with Li Shuxiang. Jing was baffled, not understanding how he knew. But her friend, sensing where the conversation was heading, suggested they calm down and resolve the misunderstanding. Xiaoyang, however, wasn't having it. "There's no misunderstanding here," he said. Jing isn't my girlfriend. She's just a doormat for that old fat guy." He slammed the door in their faces, tired of the drama. Jing still couldn't understand how he knew about her and Li Shuxiang. Her friend was just as confused, wondering why Jing hadn't told her about her relationship with Li Shuxiang. Jing quickly assured her it was nothing serious, just a few room rentals here and there. With things escalating out of control, they decided to head home and figure out their next move. But now, Xiaoya was thinking of taking things into her own hands and winning Xiaoyang over. After all, they were good friends. The following day, Xiaoyang arrived at his new property with a construction crew. He was ready to rebuild one of the factories, but wasn't sure how long it would take. Foreman Li quickly assessed the situation and explained that reinforcing the walls, setting up defensive towers, installing barbed wire, thickening the steel doors, and adding bulletproof glass would take some time. He couldn't help but wonder what kind of enemy Xiaoyang had made to need such heavy fortifications. Xiaoyang just waved him off, telling him that some things were better left unknown. He wanted to know how much it would cost to finish the project in a month. The foreman shook his head, stating that it couldn't be done that quickly. Xiaoyang wasn't fazed, saying he had connections who could get the job done faster. The foreman, standing his ground, said that the safety of the workers was more important. This took Xiaoyang by surprise. He had never met a foreman with a conscience. It turned out, though, that the cost would just be higher. Xiaoyang asked him to give him the price without further delays. After some quick calculations, Foreman Li estimated that if they were to finish in a month, the workers would need to work non-stop, and the cost would come to 20 million yuan. They'd also require a 5 million yuan deposit to start immediately. Xiaoyang didn't find this ideal. He told them to get started right away, and he'd transfer the rest of the payment within a week. The construction company had nothing to fear. If he failed to pay, the land would be theirs. Out of nowhere, Xiaoya appeared at the construction site. She confidently walked up to him, wrapped her arm around his, and asked, "What are you doing here?" Xiaoyang was already tired of this woman. In his past life, she, along with Kui Jing, had driven him out of his parents' inheritance, and now he was ready to make her pay twice as much for everything she had done. No matter how much she pretended to be a good girl, he could see through her rotten nature. Xiaoya, seeing the construction site, asked with feigned interest, "Is this the land you bought? It's so beautiful here. I bet you want to build a villa, right?" But Xiaoyang didn't care about her assumptions or thoughts on what he should do with the land. Her attempts to act like she cared made him feel nothing but disgust. She couldn't understand his cold response. Normally, just a gentle touch from her on his arm would have made him nervous, but today, he didn't even flinch. Instead, he turned away from her indifferently, walking over to the construction workers to instruct them on fixing the gate, which needed to be widened. Xiaoya couldn't miss this opportunity. After Kui Jing had ruined everything for Xiang, she thought this land might now be her chance. Xiaoyang returned home, his mind racing with ideas on how to get more money. After he had mortgaged his house, he received a loan of 3 million yuan, but that amount was barely enough to cover the first phase of construction. Still, considering the inevitable collapse of the world, he reasoned that it wouldn't matter. If he sold the house to a few buyers, it would be no problem. It was something that had to be dealt with no matter what. Then there was a knock on the door. Xiaoyang opened it to find his infuriating neighbor, Grandpa Li, standing there. This old man who lived downstairs was a wealthy, greedy person who owned the apartments on the first and second floors. He had been trying to buy the third floor from Xiang, but Xiaoyang refused to sell. As a result, Grandpa Li had started making life difficult for him, painting the doors, scattering trash, leaving coffins by his doorstep, and jamming locks. The old man had done everything in his power to harass Xiaoyang, and now he was accusing him of throwing a party the night before. Xiaoyang, however, had gone to bed early and hadn't made any noise, but there was no point in arguing over the false accusation. Xiaoyang knew what Grandpa Li really wanted, his house, so pretending to be fed up, he told the old man he was ready to sell. Grandpa Li, shocked and surprised, could hardly believe his ears. Xiaoyang had a condition though. He wanted to stay in the house for another 6 months, until he found a new place to live, but the old man had to transfer 5 million yuan into his account immediately, so he could pay the deposit for the new house. If Grandpa didn't agree to this, the deal was off. The greedy old man couldn't let the opportunity slip by, so he agreed, but insisted on signing a contract to make sure Xiaoyang couldn't change his mind. Xiaoyang had no issue with that. After all, the old man would still die in his house when the apocalypse began. Once Grandpa Li transferred the 5 million yuan, Xiaoyang now had a total of 8 million yuan, 3 million from the loan, and 5 million from the old man. It was time to tackle the next task and earn the reward. The biggest supermarket in the area was the perfect place to get started. Xiaoyang set off to stock up on supplies for the coming year. The people around him watched him, thinking he was mentally unstable. They kept their distance as he pushed several grocery carts through the aisles. When he reached the checkout line, the onlookers laughed at him, thinking he was just another fool caught up in the doomsday rumors. But Xiaoyang didn't care about their judgment. What mattered was completing the task that the system had set for him, and once he did, he earned 10 points. With those points, he bought a special supply box from the system store. Xiaoyang didn't hesitate. When he opened the box, he found a level 1 space ring, a personal subspace of 500 cubic meters, where time stood still, and anything stored there would never spoil. This was an incredible gain. The fact that time stopped inside the subspace meant he could store fresh food without worrying about it going bad. Along with a new item, Xiaoyang received a new mission, 10 years of sustenance, which would reward him with 20 points for completion. But just as he was starting to process his new acquisition, he was approached by the security chief of the supermarket, Yang Tao. Yang Tao, a former high school classmate, recognized Xiaoyang. He had been the lackey of a local bully, extorting money from weaker students. Xiaoyang had frequently clashed with him back in the day. Today, Xiaoyang didn't expect to run into Yang Tao here. Yang Tao insisted that Xiaoyang put everything back in its place, or else he wouldn't be kind. Xiaoyang responded that he hadn't changed at all, and was still picking on the weaker ones. However, Xiaoyang had no intention of returning the items. As a paying customer, he wasn't about to back down. Yang Tao immediately demanded Xiaoyang pay for the goods right there and then, threatening that if he didn't, things would get worse. An hour later, all the cashiers had finally totaled the items, 56,000. Yang Tao wasted no time demanding the payment. Without hesitation, our hero used his credit card like a tool of power. The transaction was completed successfully, leaving the security chief stunned. Just as Yang Tao was about to leave, ready to let the matter go, Xiaoyang called him to wait. Xiaoyang wasn't about to let it slide. He wanted an apology for Yang Tao's rude behavior, or he'd return everything. The security chief thought it was unnecessary, but with so many witnesses around, he knew better than to ignore it. Everyone had seen everything unfold, and was fully on Xiaoyang's side. They filmed the incident, threatening to make Yang Tao infamous on the internet unless he apologized. Xiaoyang even promised that if the apology was genuine, he'd buy 10 times the amount of goods. If Yang Tao didn't believe him, he could bring over the POS machine, and Xiaoyang would show him his account balance. When Yang Tao saw 7 million, his disbelief was evident. Xiaoyang only wanted an apology before he continued his shopping spree. Although the security chief struggled with his pride, the pressure was overwhelming, and he gave in, apologizing. As Xiaoyang walked past, he gave a piece of advice. Think before you act next time. You never know how things will turn out. Yang Tao, now trying to act friendly, asked why Xiaoyang was buying so much. Xiaoyang dismissed him, saying it was none of his business, and that he had big plans ahead. Yang Tao, seeing a business opportunity, offered his help. The supermarket didn't have enough stock for such a big deal, but he knew a wholesaler, Zhang Shengze, who had shifted to the wholesale business. Yang Tao immediately contacted him, excited to introduce Xiaoyang as a potential big client. Xiaoyang quickly realized that some people just never change. Since Yang Tao and Zhang Shengze were still working together, he could only imagine how much they were exploiting the supermarket. Soon enough, they arrived at the wholesale warehouse, and an expensive car pulled up. From the way Shengze drove, Xiaoyang knew this guy probably had never been deceived, and it was time to teach him a lesson. Although the arrogant Shengze didn't immediately recognize him, Yang Tao reminded him they were schoolmates. After a moment of thinking, Shengze finally remembered. He recalled Xiaoyang as the guy who had a bit of a backbone back in school. Shengze immediately judged him based on his cheap, non-designer clothes. He despised people who tried to act rich when they weren't. Turning to Yang Tao, Shengze began criticizing him for bringing such an unworthy client. He even kicked Yang Tao on his ass, scolding him for wasting his time. Despite Yang Tao's attempts to explain, Shengze was convinced that Xiaoyang couldn't possibly be rich. He had been in business long enough to spot who had money and who didn't. Xiaoyang, tired of the arrogance, called Shengze an ignorant person who looked down on others. Enraged, Shengze grabbed him and demanded he take back what he said. Xiaoyang wasn't scared at all, and repeated his words, calling him ignorant. To his surprise, it wasn't the insult about being looked down on that upset Shengze, but the accusation of being illiterate. It turned out that this arrogant man was far too sensitive about his lack of education. Yang Tao, seeing things escalating, stepped in quickly, warning Xiaoyang to be careful not to provoke Shengze further. Don't push him. He's really sensitive about being called illiterate. But for his trouble, Yang Tao received another kick and more insults from Shengze, who was furious that he couldn't do as he pleased. Shengze faced our protagonist with an ultimatum. Either Xiaoyang would purchase a massive shipment of goods, or he'd be forced to leave crawling on all fours. Xiaoyang didn't seem fazed by the threat. He calmly instructed Shengze to release his grip and requested the account details. Moments later, Shengze's furious expression turned into shock as he realized Xiaoyang had deposited $1 million into his account. Xiaoyang explained that this was just an initial payment. He intended to purchase 5 million worth of goods. Shengze asked about the specific items Xiaoyang needed. Xiaoyang listed basics like oil, rice, salt, snacks, and beverages, goods that had long shelf lives. A sly smile appeared on Zhang Shengze's face. He had just received a batch of near-expired products, and this was the perfect chance to unload them onto Xiaoyang. When they arrived at the warehouse, Shengze offered the entire stock at a 10% discount off the original price. The deal seemed too good to be true, and Xiaoyang immediately suspected something was off. Before agreeing, he decided to inspect the quality of the goods. True to his suspicions, it was a setup. Although the packaging looked fresh, the products were nearing their expiration dates. Zhang Shengze hadn't expected Xiaoyang to catch on so quickly, so he immediately offered a 50% discount, but Xiaoyang wasn't satisfied. He was willing to spend his 5 million, but he expected top-quality goods. However, he had a different plan for these near-expired items. Xiaoyang told Shengze he'd take the expired goods off his hands for half the price with one condition. He would pay in a month. Shengze was taken aback, but Xiaoyang quickly assured him that he'd use his house as collateral. Shengze was confused, not understanding why Xiaoyang would want expired food. He didn't realize that in the near future, these items would become a highly valuable resource. Xiaoyang didn't explain further, and simply instructed Zhang Shengze to deliver the goods to the designated address. Just then, Xiaoyang received a call about a house sale. He quickly bid farewell to Shengzhe and Yong Tao, heading off. The buyer was an elderly man who offered a 400,000 down payment and 3 months for Xiaoyang to vacate. The deal seemed almost too smooth, making Xiaoyang a little suspicious. He asked the old man why he was in such a rush. The man explained that his granddaughter needed to move for school, and Xiaoyang was the only one selling a property in the area. The old man was so upfront, even providing all the details willingly. Xiaoyang asked if he wasn't worried about the price being raised. The old man, realizing his slip, started pleading with Xiaoyang not to take advantage of him, as this was all his life savings. Xiaoyang, not want to exploit a genuine person, assured the old man that their deal was set and signed a contract. The old man was overjoyed, grateful that his granddaughter had a home, and even apologized for distracting Xiaoyang from his work. As Xiaoyang observed the old man's kindness, he felt concerned. He didn't think the man and his granddaughter would survive the apocalypse for long. Before the man left, Xiaoyang asked for his address. Later, Xiaoyang visited his property, where construction was progressing steadily. He checked with a foreman who confirmed that nearly 80% of the work was done. The walls and doors were reinforced just as Xiaoyang had requested, and the warehouse was ready for use. Excited by the progress, Xiaoyang immediately contacted Zhang Shengzi to expedite the delivery of the supplies. The warehouse, which looked more like an underground bunker, began filling up quickly. By evening, everything was in place under Xiaoyang's meticulous supervision. Once the workers departed, Xiaoyang took a moment to inspect the work. Everything was on track, and he could finally relax. At that moment, the system sent a notification congratulating him for completing the task, earning him 20 system points. When he opened the system store, he found a new item available, abilities that could be awakened before the apocalypse. Without hesitation, Xiaoyang bought a box. Upon opening it, he unlocked a level 1 ability called Mind's Eye, which allowed him to detect hostility from others. Feeling satisfied with his new power, Xiaoyang knew this would be invaluable in the early days of the apocalypse. Just as he began to unwind, the system sent him another task: gather weapons, lots of them. Xiaoyang wasn't fazed. Arming himself was exactly what he had planned. It was time to get ready for the coming chaos. Sometime later, Xiaoyang found himself at the heart of the city's late-night black market, ready to procure the weapons he needed. As he wandered through the bustling market, the constant noise of bargaining and the relentless chatter of customers and sellers filled the air. Everywhere he looked, there were hustlers trying to make a quick bucks. Out of the corner of his eye, something caught his attention. Someone familiar. It was a man he had seen before during the first disaster, Li Shuxiong. He was aggressively negotiating the price of some fake jewelry, wearing down the seller until he agreed to a much lower price. Xiaoyang hadn't expected to run into this guy tonight, but it made sense that he would be here haggling over fake jewelry. It wasn't surprising that Cui Jing had been fooled by these worthless trinkets. After a few more steps, Xiaoyang finally came across a stall that piqued his interest. Lined up in front of him were various blades, each one sharper than the last. A grin slowly spread across his face as he examined the weapons. He had finally found what he was looking for. Squatting down in front of the stall, he asked boldly if they had anything tougher. The man behind the counter, dressed in military camouflage, didn't seem to get the hint. In response, he tossed Xiaoyang a knife sharpener, suggesting he sharpen the blades himself if he wanted something tougher. Unfazed, Xiaoyang insisted that none of these knives were up to par. He needed something stronger. Realizing the implication, the vendor's demeanor shifted, his tone turning serious as he asked if Xiaoyang was looking for trouble. Just then, the sound of a phone notification interrupted the tension. Xiaoyang had just transferred 200,000 yuan to the seller's account. Holding up the receipt, he made it clear he was serious. The seller's attitude flipped instantly as he acknowledged the transfer and reassured Xiaoyang that he was indeed a serious buyer. The seller quickly called one of his men to watch over the stall, while he took Xiang to a more private location for the transaction. They entered an innocuous building nearby, where the seller started pitching some homemade guns. They were small, intended for target practice, priced at 2,000 with cheap ammo. Xiaoyang turned him down immediately, which seemed to ignite a competitive spark in the seller. He then showed off some replica revolvers modeled after military handguns. For 5,000, Xiaoyang could get a 9mm gun with bullets costing 5 each. Though Xiaoyang found the offer acceptable, he had already prepaid 200,000, so these options didn't interest him much. Curious about the prepayment, the seller asked what it meant. Xiaoyang explained that the earlier transfer was just a 10% deposit for a larger order worth 2 million. The seller, now a bit wary, questioned the young man's background. Xiaoyang quickly made up a story about how his subordinates usually handled these types of shady transactions, but he had come in person and didn't appreciate being questioned about his identity. Realizing that Xiaoyang must be involved in something serious, the seller urged him to wait. As he hurried off to a different room, he locked the door behind him and scanned the area through the window. Turning back to Xiaoyang, he assured him he had come to the right person, and that they would proceed with the deal at midnight, the day after tomorrow. He insisted on cash payment only. When Xiaoyang finally left the building, the seller treated him like a VIP. However, as fate would have it, he bumped into the same familiar face from earlier in the night market. Li Shuxiong couldn't help but comment on the coincidence. Now, it made sense why Xiaoyang had been spending so much. Li Shuxiong also suspected that Xiaoyang's involvement with Kui Jing had something to do with it. He figured the kid had recently picked up too many tips about finances and was now planning to sell everything and live a life of comfort. Zhang Xiaoyang paid no mind to the ramblings of the fatty, whose words were nothing more than empty noise. He figured it would be more practical to test out his newly unlocked ability. As he opened his mind's eye, a faint aura shimmered in his gaze. Above Mr. Cam's head, a symbol of happiness floated, while an angry one appeared above Luong. This power was definitely proving to be useful. To test it further, Xiaoyang decided to speak out loud, mocking the fatty for buying cheap second-hand items just to deceive Kui Jing. He also pointed out that the girl was nothing more than his second-hand trash, just like the rest of the junk he was trying to pass off. The comment made the fatty's anger indicator turn even darker, as he fired back with curses, clearly irritated by the jab. Watching the situation escalate, Mr. Cam, eager to keep things under control, asked Xiaoyang if that fat-ass man was bothering him. With a subtle nod, he labeled Li Shuxiong as an enemy, a clear message. Mr. Cam quickly reassured his new important client that his staff would deal with the matter and teach the fatty a lesson. Xiaoyang didn't mind, but advised them not to go too far, since he still had plans for him in the future. As the group of muscular thugs approached the overweight man, his bravado disappeared. He stammered, his usual arrogance replaced with fear. Mr. Cam didn't waste any more time with the man. With a swift motion, he pulled out a baton, and the men quickly took care of the fatty, leaving him bruised and battered on the dark road. His white suit was now covered in shoe prints, and his face showed the evidence of a hard beating. The incident only deepened the fatty's hatred for Xiaoyang. 2 days later, the agreed-upon meeting was set at a warehouse, and both parties were punctual. In front of Xiaoyang, a truck full of suspicious crates awaited, exactly what he was hoping for. When his firearm arrived, signaling the success of his task, the system rewarded him with 10 points, bringing his total to 20. He eagerly opened the crates, revealing an arsenal of weapons, heavy rifles, pistols, and all the necessary gear. Then, unexpectedly, the system added a bonus, a +2 physical enhancement potion. Xiaoyang was pleasantly surprised by this bonus, especially since it was double the strength of the potions in the system store. Not wasting a moment, he injected the potion into his veins. He had expected a brief pinch, but the surge of power was far more intense than he anticipated. The pain was sharp and immediate as the enhancement spread through his body. With his physical score now boosted by 2 points, Xiaoyang felt 40% stronger than before. Determined to make the most of this newfound strength, Xiaoyang checked out the system store once more and noticed another physical enhancement potion. Seeing the value of increasing his strength even more, he decided to take the plunge. After injecting the second potion, his physical score shot up to 8, making him 60% stronger than the average person. Excited to put his new power to the test, Xiaoyang looked around the warehouse and spotted some thick iron bars that were scattered about. He grabbed one, a sturdy bar used in construction, and threw it into the air. With a powerful kick, he bent the rod significantly, sending it flying into the nearby wall, with enough force to create a noticeable dent. His kick had been so powerful that it left a visible impression on the wall. With this level of strength, Xiaoyang felt confident that he could handle anything, even the early stages of an apocalypse. As for the weapons, he knew better than to leave them exposed. Storing them safely in his spatial ring was the wisest move. With a simple gesture, he pointed the magical ring at the contents of the truck, and the weapons were absorbed into the ring instantly. The day after tomorrow, the apocalypse was set to begin. Time was running out, and Xiaoyang still had a few things to wrap up. However, he couldn't shake the image of the old man who had tried to buy his house. The old man had offered what little savings he had to secure a future for his granddaughter. Xiaoyang had been through countless battles and betrayals during the first apocalypse, but he'd never ignored the needs of the less fortunate. The least he could do was send some supplies to the old man and his granddaughter as a small token of repayment. The following day, Xiaoyang found himself at a shabby apartment building, located in a rundown area of another city. The building was in such bad condition that without a GPS, it would have been impossible to find. The old man had been renting in such a low-cost, dilapidated place, and without an elevator, it was clear he wasn't well off. His apartment was located on the top floor. Xiaoyang knocked on the door, but then quickly realized he should probably remove the supplies from his storage ring, or explaining them would be difficult. Activating the ring, he watched as box after box of essential supplies materialized, filling the hallway with provisions. At that moment, the old man reached the door and opened it, expecting it to be the landlord. He quickly assumed the young man was here to collect the rent, promising to pay next week. But when he took a closer look, he realized it was Mr. Zhang. Behind him, boxes were piled up, filling the hallway and stretching up the stairs, making the old man even more confused. Xiaoyang told him to wait until later for the full explanation, but for now they needed to get the boxes inside before anyone noticed. After a few minutes of lifting, most of which Xiaoyang did on his own, they managed to get everything in. The old man couldn't believe how easily the young man handled it. not even looking tired. Meanwhile, Xiaoyang was checking the space, trying to figure out if it could serve as a safe shelter. He decided it would do, especially since the front door was sturdy enough. Once everything was inside, Xiaoyang turned to the old man, urging him to pay close attention. He explained that the supplies they brought needed to be rationed carefully because they were meant to last for about 6 months, starting tomorrow. Just as he was about to go into more detail, something caught his eye. A photo placed nearby. It was of the proud old man with a beautiful young woman, his granddaughter. To his surprise, the woman in the picture was none other than Li Shanshan, a close friend from his past during the first apocalypse. Xiaoyang immediately asked the old man if the girl in the picture was named Shanshan. This puzzled the old man further, as he hadn't mentioned her name to the young man before. Xiaoyang's expression grew serious, and he quickly asked where Shanshan was now. The old man explained that she was still at school while they were finishing up the house paperwork. Xiaoyang remembered how Shanshan had once regretted dragging her grandfather into the chaos during the early days of the first apocalypse. He recalled how her grandfather had risked everything to save her. In that doomed timeline, the old man had fought his way through a zombie-infested school to save Shanshan, only to die in the process. As someone who had been close to the old man in his past life, Xiaoyang promised himself he wouldn't let that happen again. Turning to the old man, he declared that the house was no longer for sale. The old man panicked, thinking Mr. Zhang was backing out of the deal. But Xiaoyang gave him a chilling piece of news. The world would soon descend into chaos, and the house along with Shanshan's school wouldn't matter. The only thing that mattered now was getting Shanshan to safety. This sudden declaration only confused the old man further. Xiaoyang realized he couldn't explain everything in detail right now, so he decided to simplify things. He urged the old man to imagine the horrors of a famine. While it sounded terrifying, the old man couldn't grasp how this applied to their situation. Seeing that words weren't enough, Xiaoyang decided to show him instead. With a simple gesture, he made all the supply boxes disappear, sucked into a storage ring in an instant. The room, once crowded with boxes, was now completely empty. The old man stared, dumbfounded. Xiaoyang calmly explained that he had special powers and could see the future. If the old man wanted to survive and save Shanshan, he needed to listen carefully and follow his lead. Their next task was to get Shanshan out of her school. As they drove there at full speed, the old man was still trying to process everything. His mouth opened in disbelief. Xiaoyang drove like a man on a mission, ignoring all traffic rules in his haste to get there. When they arrived, they found Shanshan surrounded by a group of students near one of the school buildings. She was being bullied by a couple of jealous girls. One slapped her across the face, while another kicked her in the stomach for daring to speak out. The situation was escalating, but the old man was too focused on reaching his granddaughter to notice the growing tension. As he ran toward Shanshan, the bullies shifted their attention to him. He yelled at them to stop hurting his granddaughter, but their attitude only grew more aggressive. A group of thugs stood in his way, showing their weapons and telling him to back off and let the girls handle things. Without hesitation, the old man charged forward, yelling at the young men for being heartless bullies. One of the thugs raised a steel bat and aimed it at the old man's head. It would have been a serious blow if it hit, but Xiaoyang reacted quickly, stepping in to stop the attack. He glanced at the thug with disdain, realizing that the younger generation still had a lot to learn about bullying. The other two thugs thought Xiaoyang was Shanshan's older brother and tried to threaten him, but Xiaoyang was ready. With a swift movement, he delivered a powerful kick to one of the thugs, knocking the wind out of him. The thug was sent flying through the air as though he had been shot out of a cannon. Watching his comrade get tossed around like that, the remaining two thugs hesitated. Xiaoyang clearly knew his way around a fight. Maybe if they teamed up, they could land a blow. But judging by the cold, calculating look in his eyes, it seemed unlikely. One thug approached from the front, armed with a knife, while the other snuck up from behind with a bat. It wasn't the most brilliant plan, but it was all they had. The first move came from the one with the bat, swinging it wildly. Xiaoyang, sensing the attack, easily dodged by ducking low. His enhanced body was already proving its worth. Thanks to the potions he'd taken to boost his physical abilities, his reflexes were on another level. He grabbed the thug by the collar, and with a swift motion, he slammed the thug into the ground, the impact knocking him out cold. Seeing his partner go down, the remaining thug rushed at Xiaoyang, knife in hand. Xiaoyang didn't even flinch as he deflected the weapon, locking eyes with a blonde thug in a chilling stare. With no hesitation, Xiaoyang prepared for another strike, kicking the thug on the side of his leg. The power behind the kick was enough to send him crumpling to the ground. In mere moments, the two wannabe tough guys were out of the picture. Now, Xiaoyang's focus shifted to the bitches assaulted Shanshan for no reason. After surviving the brutal first apocalypse, Xiaoyang had adopted a mantra of equal rights, equal fights. So, without warning, he slapped one of the girl across the face. The slap was forceful, sending a shiver through her and leaving her cheek red and stinging. As for the other bitch, who had been pulling Shanshan's hair, Xiaoyang decided she needed a taste of her own medicine. He didn't release his grip, no matter how much she begged. With a fierce glare, he drew the knife from the fallen thug and pressed it to her neck. Terrified, the girl's eyes widened with fear, and the next sound that rang out was a sharp slash, followed by a gut-wrenching scream. Xiaoyang didn't even flinch. During the first apocalypse, he had done whatever it took to survive, and those instincts still guided him. The girl, now trembling, watched in shock as her friend collapsed to the ground, seemingly defeated and powerless. Don't worry, our protagonist isn't all that brutal. Well, not yet, at least. When faced with a bully, he didn't resort to anything too extreme. Instead, he just gave her a little haircut. Yep, right there in front of everyone, humiliating her completely. Did she learn her lesson? Not a chance. The bully, furious and teary-eyed, screamed that she wouldn't let Xiaoyang get away with it. But he didn't even flinch at her empty threats. With an air of dominance, he glared at her crumpled figure on the ground, sprinkling the freshly cut locks over her head like confetti, a final touch of maximum disrespect. While everyone else stood around, baffled by his actions, Xiaoyang calmly told her he'd done her a favor. According to him, long hair would only become a burden soon enough. The crowd didn't get it, but he seemed to know exactly what he was talking about. Shifting his focus to Shanshan, Xiaoyang told her to get with them immediately. Inside the car, Grandpa Li told Shanshan that she is not going back to school anymore. The old man had a wild look in his eyes as he explained his reasoning. A massive famine is coming, and survival has to be our top priority. Shanshan understandably thought her grandpa had lost it. She was convinced he'd fallen for some scam call or hoax. As they bickered in the back seat, Xiaoyang just watched, amused but relieved to see Shanshan safe. Finally, though, he spoke up, revealing the real reason for the urgency. The famine story was a lie. He'd made it up to simplify things for the old man. What was really coming was something much worse, something catastrophic, the apocalypse. He wasn't sugarcoating it anymore. He explained that in just a few days, modern civilization, as they knew it, would come to an end. Shanshan was skeptical at first, but before she could argue, Xiaoyang suggested she check her phone, cause she'll see the first signs of it now, and sure enough, the news confirmed it. A video popped up on Shanshan's screen, showing absolute chaos at a crowded train station. A man was being restrained by authorities, screaming some eerily prophetic words about a strange toxic smog. What made it worse, he was biting people. Some thought it was rabies, but his lucidity suggested otherwise. Things spiraled out of control fast. The man broke free, attacking more people, and the scene turned into an outright nightmare. Xiaoyang's chilling words rang true. This was only the beginning. The first signs are already here, he said. Tomorrow will officially mark day 1 of the apocalypse. He explained that a mysterious toxic smog would begin spreading across several provinces, including Province B. The effects would be devastating. Mutations, madness, and worse. A significant portion of the population would turn into mindless zombies, driven only by a hunger for flesh. And for the lucky ones who survived the smog, their fate wouldn't be much kinder. For Shanshan, the idea of zombies wasn't new. She'd seen them in movies, TV shows, and pop culture, but this wasn't fiction anymore. Still, it was hard to grasp the reality of it all. Yet, when the chaos erupted, whether tomorrow, next week, or the week after, there'd be no room for disbelief. On their journey back to headquarters, time was everything, but luck wasn't on their side. Traffic was backed up for miles. Even the emergency lane, usually a safe bet for getting through quickly, was jammed. Cars weren't moving, and the group's frustration was growing. The old man, already nervous, couldn't stop thinking about what Mr. Zhang had mentioned earlier, the zombies. Now stuck in a sea of stationary vehicles, his anxiety spiked. Xiaoyang tried to reassure him, saying they were safe for now, but even he couldn't dismiss the possibility of a small outbreak nearby. The situation worsened when a luxury car came speeding down the emergency lane. The driver, reckless and arrogant, seemed determined to bypass the chaos. As traffic inched forward, the car swerved sharply, trying to cut into Xiaoyang's lane. The move was sudden, almost causing a collision. Xiaoyang slammed on the brakes just in time, narrowly avoiding a crash. Xiaoyang held his ground, refusing to let the car through. But the driver wasn't backing down. Pulling up beside Xiaoyang's window, he hurled insults and curses, acting as if he were the victim. The old man advised Xiaoyang to let it go, pointing out that the driver was likely wealthy and powerful. But Xiaoyang wasn't one to be intimidated. If this guy wanted trouble, Xiaoyang was ready to give it to him. For nearly an hour, they sat in that miserable traffic jam. When it finally cleared, they hoped the ordeal was over. It wasn't. The same luxury car was now behind them, tailgating aggressively. The driver wasn't just reckless, he was vengeful. This was no ordinary road rage. The car sped up, weaving dangerously close, attempting to provoke Xiaoyang. The old man pleaded with him to avoid escalating the situation, but Xiaoyang had had enough. The apocalypse was coming. Why tolerate scumbags anymore? Xiaoyang decided to play along, taunting the driver. He bet on the rich brat losing his nerve, and he was right. In a moment of recklessness, the luxury car swerved wildly, nearly crashing into a hill. Yet, even after almost wrecking, the driver refused to take responsibility. Instead, he called the traffic police, demanding surveillance footage to track Xiaoyang down. As the night deepened, the trio finally arrived at their destination. By now, the city was cloaked in darkness. Stepping out of the car, they were greeted by the fortress, an imposing structure that seemed to loom over them. The old man stared in awe, his mouth agape, overwhelmed by the sheer scale and detail of the compound. Shan, standing beside him, remarked that it all felt like overkill, a fortress too grand for what they might need. Xiaoyang, calm and composed, told them to rest up. Tomorrow, he hinted cryptically, everything you know will change. The world is entering hardcore mode. The next morning, Shan woke feeling better than she had in ages. No alarms, no classes, just the rare luxury of a peaceful morning. As she stretched and looked around, she noticed Xiaoyang nearby, already up and ready for the day. Realizing that this was the perfect moment for exploration, Shan suggested a tour, and Xiaoyang obliged, inviting Grandpa to join them. The fortress tour began with Xiaoyang explaining the sheer strength of the compound. The walls were made of reinforced concrete, thick and unyielding. The gates, crafted from solid steel, 3 centimeters thick, were remote-controlled and impenetrable without heavy weaponry. The design made it clear this was a fortress built for survival, ready to keep out both the living and the undead. However, Xiaoyang laid down a strict rule. No one else under any circumstances could enter the fortress without his explicit permission. This didn't sit well with Shan. She couldn't help but question the morality of leaving other survivors outside vulnerable to the undead, but Xiaoyang didn't argue. Instead, he led them to a different section of the compound, a fenced area with scattered shipping containers. This, Xiaoyang explained, was a buffer zone. If survivors managed to find their way here, they could use this area as a temporary shelter. However, access to the main fortress remained strictly off-limits without his approval. In the chaos of the apocalypse, human nature would become unpredictable, and the risks of betrayal or exploitation were too high. Even the old man, initially skeptical, nodded in agreement as the harsh truth sank in. Next, Xiaoyang led them to the food storage facility. When they entered, they were greeted by rows upon rows of supplies stacked high and organized meticulously. It was an overwhelming sight, more provisions than they could have imagined. Xiaoyang took a moment to activate his mind's eye ability, scanning the room to check their hostility status. To his relief, both Grandpa and Shan displayed happy, trusting expressions, a clear indication that they could be relied upon. As the tour continued, Xiaoyang revealed the fortress's weapons cache. He handed Shan a sleek crossbow and gave Grandpa a sturdy shotgun, emphasizing the importance of keeping these weapons secure. In this new world, losing control of their weapons could lead to chaos. Never let these fall into the wrong hands, Xiaoyang warned, the seriousness in his voice leaving no room for doubt. Xiaoyang had just finished showing Shan and Grandpa around the fortress when a notification flashed before him, a new system task. It was another mission, and this one hit close to home. He was tasked with reuniting with an old comrade, Zhang Qi. The name brought back memories and a mix of emotions, but what surprised him most was the timing. Standing on the viewing deck, he noticed a glowing arrow pointing toward the city, marking Zhang Qi's location. This was a fortunate coincidence. Xiaoyang had already planned to track down his former allies, and now the system seemed to reward him for his intentions. Wasting no time, he turned to Shan and Grandpa, reinforcing the fortress rules one last time. They were to stay vigilant and not break any of the guidelines no matter what. When asked where he was heading, Xiaoyang simply replied, recruiting and building the team. With that, he hopped into his car and drove off, following the glowing arrow toward Zhang Qi's location. The arrow led him to a KTV bar. Inside, the atmosphere was jovial, with groups of friends enjoying their night. Among them was Zhang Qi, his signature silver hair shining even under the dim neon lights. He was laughing, drinking, and singing karaoke with his friends, seemingly untouched by the turmoil outside. Zhang Qi and one of his friends stumbled out of the room to find a restroom, their steps unsteady and their laughter loud. After handling their business, the two drunkenly wandered back into the hallway. That's when it happened. In his inebriated state, Zhang Qi accidentally bumped into a girl. It was a harmless brush, nothing serious, but the girl's irritated expression told a different story. Zhang Qi quickly apologized and tried to move on. Unfortunately, the girl's escort wasn't as forgiving. The man, a towering figure with an intimidating aura, saw this as a personal affront. Without hesitation, he called Zhang Qi a punk and delivered a brutal kick that sent him sprawling into the wall. Zhang Qi hit the ground hard, the pain evident in his groans. His friend, though clearly scared, didn't hesitate to check on him, but seeing Zhang Qi in pain sparked something brave or perhaps reckless in a friend. Standing up, he yelled at the thug, calling out his aggression. This boldness only made things worse. The thug, unaccustomed to being challenged, became enraged. Grabbing Zhang Qi's friend by the collar, he effortlessly lifted him off the ground, showcasing his brute strength. Zhang Qi, despite his pain, tried to intervene. Struggling to his feet, he pleaded with a thug to let his friend go, admitting fault and apologizing profusely. Amid the chaos, a KTV staff member appeared, drawn by the noise. He wasn't in the best shape, recently recovering from stomach flu only to catch a cold, but his sense of duty prevailed. Bar fights were nothing new in his line of work, and he knew the drill. Approaching cautiously, he tried to mediate, asking both parties to calm down and de-escalate, but the thug wasn't having it. He turned his fury on the staff member, interpreting his interference as disrespect. To make matters worse, He loudly demanded that the bar's owner come out immediately, threatening to shut the place down if his demands weren't met. The staff member, though clearly nervous, gestured discreetly to Zhang Qi and his friend, urging them to leave while the thug's attention was diverted. The two young men fled. Back in karaoke room 3090, Zhang Qi and his friend barged in, panting and wide-eyed as if they barely escaped a predator. Their other friends turned to ask what had happened. The duo quickly explained, recounting how they had bumped into a drunken thug in the hallway, leading to threats and a near beating. They expressed gratitude for the quick-witted staffer who had stepped in to defuse the situation, even if only temporarily. One of their friends, the hot-headed Chen Chong, wasn't having it. He stood up, declaring that their mechanical engineering class had a reputation to uphold and shouldn't back down from anyone. He even suggested rallying other students from their department to teach the thugs a lesson. Zhang Qi, however, stopped him in his tracks. Acting tough and seeking revenge was a foolish move. With less than a year until graduation, they didn't need trouble. They needed to keep their heads down and focus on their celebration. Reluctantly, Chen Chong sat back down, and the group decided to resume their singing and dancing, trying to salvage the night. But trouble wasn't done with them yet. Moments later, the drunk thug and his gang burst into the room. Their arrival was loud and violent, with the thug dragging the battered KTV staffer by the collar, before throwing him onto the floor like a rag doll. The sight of the injured staffer silenced the room, and a chill ran through the group of college boys. The thug, his eyes scanning the room, pointed directly at Zhang Qi and his friends, grabbed them. He barked at his crew. His henchmen moved swiftly, closing in on the group. Fear paralyzed the students, who didn't dare resist. They had seen what the thugs were capable of and didn't want to escalate things further. Chen Chong, however, wasn't about to go down quietly. He taunted the gang, daring them to let him make a single phone call, implying he had backup of his own. This only enraged the thug further. Grabbing a full whiskey bottle, the thug smashed it against Chen Chong's head. The impact was brutal, sending a mix of blood and whiskey streaming down Chen Chong's face as he collapsed to the floor. Zhang Qi watched in horror, his mind racing. Outside the KTV bar, help was arriving, but he didn't know it yet. Xiao Yang had just pulled up, stepping out of his car with a calm smile. The glowing system notification had guided him here, and the sight of the lively bar amused him. A KTV bar was exactly the kind of place he expected college-age Zhang Qi to frequent. Inside, chaos continued. Chen Chong, despite his injuries, showed remarkable resilience. Grabbing a nearby metal ashtray, he tried to fight back. His guts impressed even the thugs, but his defiance irritated them more. The gang quickly subdued him, and the head thug delivered another savage blow with a fresh bottle. Blood splattered as Chen Chong slumped to the floor, groaning in pain. But Zhang Qi wasn't one to back down. Ignoring the armed thugs surrounding them, he charged at the head thug, determined to stand up for his friend. Glasses, the ever-loyal companion, joined in to support him. Their bravery was admirable, but the odds were overwhelming. 2 college students against a gang of thugs was a recipe for disaster. The remaining friend in the group, the cowardly dude, was trembling in fear, unwilling to join the fray. Amidst the chaos, something even more terrifying began to unfold. The injured KTV staff member, lying in a heap on the floor, suddenly began to stir. His movements were jerky and unnatural, his groans becoming guttural snarls. His skin pad and his veins darkened. A horrifying transformation was taking place. In mere moments, he became a rabid zombie. With terrifying speed, he lunged at the nearest thug, sinking his teeth into the man's back like a predator attacking its prey. The bitten thug yelled in shock and pain, trying to shake the zombie off. At first, he thought it was just some deranged, dog-like behavior, but the creature's bite was unrelenting, and its strength was unnatural. Another thug rushed to pull the zombie off his friend, but the creature was too strong. In a swift motion, it let go of its first victim and latched onto the second thug's arm, biting down with alarming ferocity. The room erupted into screams as panic spread among the gangsters and students alike. Meanwhile, Zhang Qi and Glasses tried to hold their ground. Even as fear gripped their classmates, the cowardly friend was now trembling uncontrollably, nearly fainting from terror. The situation looked bleak. The zombie's attacks were relentless, and its enhanced physical strength made it nearly impossible to overpower. If this continued, everyone in the room was at risk of falling victim to the infected staffer. At that moment, Zhang Xiaoyong had arrived. Without hesitation, he grabbed the rabid zombie by the back of its neck and effortlessly lifted it off the ground with a single arm. The sheer strength he displayed stunned everyone in the room. Xiaoyang carried the struggling zombie to the nearest glass wall and smashed it into the pane, shattering it completely. Glass shards rained down as the zombie slumped momentarily, dazed from the impact. Xiaoyang turned back to the room, his voice cutting through the chaos like a blade. "Everyone, stop." The thugs, the students, and even the terrified Zhang Qi froze. Xiaoyang's cold demeanor and the ease with which he had handled the rabid zombie commanded instant respect and fear. The thugs, who had struggled with the creature in pairs, realized this newcomer was no ordinary man. However, the head thug wasn't ready to back down. Misreading the situation, he directed his anger toward Xiaoyang, still thinking he was the top dog. Ignoring the thug entirely, Xiaoyang turned to Zhang Qi. "Were you bitten?" Zhang Qi, still reeling from the chaos, stammered, said he wasn't bitten. Without wasting time on further explanations, Xiaoyang simply ordered Zhang Qi to follow him. For some reason Zhang Qi couldn't quite explain, he felt an unshakable compulsion to comply. However, as he moved to follow, the head thugs stepped in his way, still clinging to the delusion that he was in control. Before another fight could erupt, one of the bitten gangsters began coughing violently. His voice was, and he groaned about a splitting headache and dizziness. Xiaoyang's sharp eyes scanned him, catching the unmistakable early signs of mutation. The thug exhibited every classic symptom: relentless coughing, extreme dizziness, and that ominous bite wound festering on his shoulder. Even the thug's offhand comment about having a runny nose earlier in the day confirmed Xiaoyang's suspicions. Yep, he's bitten, Xiang muttered to himself, watching as the rot visibly spread from the infected wound. The proximity of the bite to the nervous system was accelerating the process. The man didn't have much time left before he'd turn into a full-blown zombie. They couldn't afford to deal with 2 rabid zombies in such a confined space. Still holding the first rabid zombie by the neck, with one hand, Xiaoyang made his move. He began dragging the thrashing creature across the room, his strength leaving everyone dumbfounded. Xiaoyang hauled the zombie to the restroom door. He yanked it open, shoved the undead creature inside, and slammed the sliding door shut in one fluid motion. The rabid zombie immediately started pounding on the door, snarling and clawing with feral rage. The sound sent shivers through the room. Everyone stared at Xiaoyang, their faces a mix of shock and confusion. What kind of person could casually wrangle a zombie like that? Xiaoyang dusted off his hands, his expression darkening. The immediate threat was contained, but his focus now shifted back to the living threats in the room. His gaze locked onto Zhang Qi, who was still frozen in disbelief. Xiaoyang then asked him, "Which one of these thugs do I need to deal with first?" Zhang Qi blinked, his brain struggling to catch up. The question confused him even more. Who is this guy? Why was he so protective of him? They didn't even know each other. Meanwhile, the head thug, his pride now in tatters, decided he'd had enough. "You're dead, punk," he roared, charging at Xiaoyang with a wild swing. Xiaoyang didn't even flinch. His expression was one of pure boredom, as if he were dealing with a pesky mosquito. Before the thug's fist could connect, Xiaoyang moved like lightning, grabbing the man's face with one hand. His fingers dug into the thug's skin as he pushed forward, smashing him face first into the glass table in the center of the room. The table shattered with a deafening crash, sending shards flying everywhere. One of the other bitten gangsters, his face pale and sweaty, staggered forward in a fit of rage. Xiaoyang adjusted his stance, his movements calm and precise. In one swift motion, he delivered a sharp blow to the man's windpipe. The thug collapsed instantly, his breath choking out as he fell flat on his back. As his comrades rushed to his side, panic set in. The thug started convulsing violently, foam spilling from his mouth as his body jerked uncontrollably. His eyes rolled back, and his skin began to turn an eerie gray. The infection had reached its final stage. The man was turning right before their eyes, and there was nothing they could do to stop it. Xiaoyang stepped forward, flexing his fists. "Anyone else want to test their luck?" he asked, his voice calm yet menacing. Turning to Zhang Qi, Xiaoyang gave a firm command. "Take your friends and get out of here now." Zhang Qi didn't hesitate. He and his classmates helped the injured Chen Chong to his feet, lending their shoulders to support him. Together, they stumbled out of the room as fast as they could, grateful to escape the nightmare. The gangsters, now desperate to retreat, tried to follow suit. They carried their wounded comrades, who were showing increasingly alarming symptoms of infection. But as they reached the door, Xiaoyang blocked their path. "You're not going anywhere," he said coldly, his presence towering over them like a storm cloud. The head thug, still nursing his injuries, tried one last act of defiance. "You think you can stop us?" he spat, his voice shaky yet defiant. The gangsters cowered under his gaze, their drunken bravado long gone. For the first time in their lives, they realized they weren't the top dogs they thought they were. Xiaoyang didn't bother responding. He shoved the thug back effortlessly, sending him sprawling to the ground once again, and the closing door shut. The gangster's bruised ego couldn't take it. He scrambled up and started pounding on the door as Xiaoyang stepped outside, slamming it shut behind him. The head thug screamed, banging on the locked door in a blind rage, but his tirade was cut short by a guttural growl behind him. One of his bitten men had succumbed to the infection. The thug turned just in time to see the bloodshot, crimson eyes of his now rabid friend lunging at him with terrifying speed. The room erupted into chaos as the other gangsters tried to fight off their former friend, but it was too late. The infection spread quickly, and soon the room devolved into carnage. Outside, Xiaoyang stood silently, holding the door handle firmly to keep anyone from escaping. Muffled screams and the sound of tearing flesh echoed from the other side, sending chills down the spine of anyone who could hear. A hesitant KTV employee approached him, curiosity mixed with fear, asking, "What's going on in there?" Xiaoyang didn't waste time. "Get the keys and lock this door now. Don't let anyone in or out. Call the police and paramedics. Tell them it's a rabies flu outbreak." The employees stared at him, frozen in shock, but Xiaoyang told him to move now. The urgency snapped the worker out of his daze. He ran to grab the keys, returning to lock the doors securely from the outside. The eerie, inhuman noises coming from the room made the employees shiver. One of them, too curious for their own good, hurried to the security room to check the live footage inside the room. What they saw made their blood run cold. The screen showed a grotesque scene of rabid figures feasting on their dead comrades. Blood splattered the walls, and the head thug's girlfriend, previously full of life, was now being torn apart by the monsters. Her lifeless eyes stared blankly as the infected devoured her. The security team immediately called the authorities, their hands trembling as they reported the horrors unfolding in their establishment. Meanwhile, Xiaoyang led Zhangqi and his friends out of the building. "This area isn't safe anymore," Xiaoyang said, his tone firm. "You need to leave now." Still shaken, the college boys didn't argue. They followed him to his car, helping the injured Chen Chong inside. As Xiaoyang drove them away, Zhangqi finally broke the silence. "Thanks for helping us back there," he said hesitantly. "But who are you? Why did you step in?" Xiaoyang glanced at him, said, "I was hired to protect you by someone who wants to stay anonymous." The explanation made sense, at least enough for the moment. The coward boy nervously asked, "That rabid flu, it's real, isn't it? I thought it was just a hoax." Xiaoyang's expression darkened. "What do you think you saw back there? Those weren't drunken fights or wild animals. It's real, and it's just the beginning." Glasses gulped, his voice trembling. Is there any cure? A vaccine? No," Xiaoyang said bluntly. "There's no cure, no medicine, and no way to stop it. It's already started, and it's only going to get worse. If you want to survive, you'll listen to everything I say from now on." As they drove through the streets, Xiaoyang's point was further proven when they saw an infected man chasing a terrified pedestrian on the side of the road. The chaos hadn't completely consumed the city yet, but the outbreak was spreading rapidly. Soon, there would be no safe place left. Looking at the back seat, Xiaoyang's mind wandered to a darker memory. In their past life, one of Zhangqi's friend had betrayed him, leading to the deaths of countless people at the hands of zombies. Zhangqi was the only one who barely survived, but the betrayal scarred him deeply. Xiaoyang's eyes flicked to the rearview mirror, scanning the faces of the college boys sitting behind him. One of them had been the traitor. The question was, which one? On the other side of town, Kui Jing was on a phone call with the man she affectionately called Honey. She had been feeling unusually anxious lately. The witch was promised some much-needed supplies, but things in her neighborhood had started to spiral out of control. Too scared to step out herself, she relied on his assurances that he'd deliver the goods as soon as he could. Just as she was about to press him for details, a sudden knock at the door startled her, nearly causing her heart to leap out of her chest. She hung up immediately, her breath shaky as she cautiously approached the door. Peeking through the peephole, she exhaled in relief. It was her friend, Xiaoya. Kui Jing quickly unlocked the door to let her in. Even as they exchanged greetings, a lingering unease hung in the air. Earlier that day, an elderly man named Lu, who lived on the building's first floor, had been taken away by both the police and an ambulance. Though the incident was hushed up, Kui Jing had heard the commotion from her apartment that morning. The two witches began to piece together what was happening around them. It was hard to dismiss the growing evidence that the rabies flu news wasn't just media fear-mongering. As for Li Shuxiong's promised delivery of supplies, it was still nowhere to be seen. Xiaoya had warned Ka Jing that greasy fatty couldn't be trusted, but they both knew he had his uses. If nothing else, he could be their pawn in a plan they just cooked up. Her idea was simple: ransack Zhang Xiaoyang's secret stockpile. The stockpile they'd learned was massive, enough to make anyone rich in the middle of this escalating epidemic. Xiaoya had already tried and failed to seduce Xiaoyang, getting herself kicked out in the process. Not wanted to give up, she had one of her devoted followers spy on him. That's how she discovered trucks regularly unloading supplies at an abandoned factory he'd refurbished. Clearly, Xiaoyang had known about the epidemic long before the news broke. The two witches decided it was time to act. They planned to use Li Shuxiong to get into Xiaoyang's fortress and take a share of his hoarded riches by force. Meanwhile, Xiaoyang had just returned to his base camp without any trouble. As his car rolled into the compound, it was hard not to be impressed by what he had built in such a short time. Zhang Qi was visibly amazed. Fortress seemed a more fitting term than base camp. Xiaoyang smiled at Zhang Qi's reaction. It was the same awe everyone felt the first time they saw it. The sound of their arrival stirred the camp's residents, who emerged with weapons at the ready. Once they recognized Xiaoyang, relief washed over their faces. Grandpa Shan and his granddaughter Shanshan were particularly glad to see him return safely. Xiaoyang reassured them he was fine and introduced his companions. He knew Zhangqi well, but simply referred to the others as Zhangqi's classmates. Grandpa Shan and Shanshan welcomed the newcomers warmly, assuring them they were now in a safe place. Xiaoyang quickly assigned Grandpa Shan to take the group on a tour of the fortress, explaining the rules and regulations. Glasses, one of the newcomers, couldn't help but feel like they'd walked into a military base. Before they could even start the tour, Yiming, another new arrival, timidly spoke up. He asked if they could be given weapons to help defend the fortress. Xiaoyang shot him a sharp look, suspicion flickering in his eyes. They had barely been there an hour, and this guy was already asking to be armed. That was suspicious. Glasses whispered to Yiming, urging him to tone down his eagerness. They were newcomers after all. Trust had to be earned first. To calm the situation, Xiaoyang promised that weapons would be issued to everyone in a few days. For now, their priority was to get Chen Chong's head injury treated. His condition was severe, so the medical room was their next stop. After a few hours, the boys finally managed to shake off the tension and the lingering smell of booze after their life-or-death ordeal. Yiming turned to Glasses with a grumble. "Why'd you stop me earlier?" he asked. "If you hadn't, we'd probably have guns by now." Yiming's little speech about needing protection in their current situation would have been funny if it weren't so irritating. Without weapons, he compared staying in the fortress to being under house arrest. Thankfully, Glasses had enough sense to be grateful for being saved from the infected, instead of stirring up unnecessary trouble. But Yiming wasn't done. He kept sowing seeds of distrust among his classmates, questioning Xiaoyang's story. Hired by an anonymous client for protection, Yiming scoffed. "That doesn't even make sense." He gritted his teeth and brought up Chen Chong's treatment too. While Xiaoyang had promised to monitor Chen's condition, Yiming found the medical room's high security suspicious. That's when Yiming dropped his most ridiculous theory yet. He claimed Xiaoyang might be planning to harvest Chen's organs in secret. It was absurd, but Yiming seemed determined to recruit others to his cause. His plan? Strike first against their so-called savior. Glasses immediately shot down the idea. Betraying Xiaoyang, the man who had saved their lives, was out of the question. But Yiming wasn't backing down. "I'd rather betray the world than let the world betray me," he said, trying to sound dramatic. His ultimate goal was to take over the fortress and claim control of the area. Yiming even had the gall to suggest capturing Grandpa and the girl if Xiaoyang ever left. He didn't stop there. He made a disgusting comment about Shanshan being cute and hinted at his twisted intentions. The boys stared at him with utter disgust. Realizing his plan was going nowhere, Yiming waved it off with a laugh. "Relax, I was just joking," he said. Zhang Qi, naive as ever, took the excuse at face value. Glasses pointed out the obvious. If Xiaoyang really wanted to harvest their organs, they'd already be locked up and helpless by now. As the group left the showers, Yiming silently wrote them off as not worthy of his grand plans. He was convinced that in times of chaos, only the ruthless survive. While Yiming brooded over his rejected schemes, Grandpa Shan gave Xiaoyang an update. Zhang Qi and the others had started settling in, and Chen Chong was on the observation. As instructed, all doors and windows had been secured. Xiaoyang thanked Grandpa Shan and Shanshan for their hard work, urging them to rest up. Before they left, Xiaoyang gave them a quiet warning. "Keep an eye on Zhang Qi's classmates," he said. "I'm sensing some traitorous vibes." In the dead of night, Xiaoyang headed straight to his warehouse to take care of some business. He opened the systems item shop and carefully inspected the offerings. With a few clicks, he redeemed the Level 1 Apocalypse Farmer box for 2 points, the Level 1 Food Supply box for 5 points, and the Level 1 Armed Deterrent Supply box for another 5 points. This left him with 8 points remaining. The rewards were as practical as they were impressive. The Apocalypse Farmer box provided 5 zero corn seeds, ensuring a potential food source for the long term. The Food Supply box delivered an impressive haul: 200 kilograms of starch sausage, 100 kilograms of pre-cooked braised pork with preserved vegetables, and 50 boxes of pickled cabbage noodles. Meanwhile, the Armed Deterrent box contained 1,500 rounds of 9mm ammunition, a crucial asset for defense. Xiaoyang piled the rewards together and couldn't help but feel a sense of accomplishment at the sheer size of the haul. In an apocalypse where resources would soon become scarce, supplies like these were priceless. It wasn't the same as having money to spend freely, but in this grim reality, this was worth far more than cash. The next morning, the tranquility of the fortress was shattered by the arrival of multiple vehicles pulling up to the gate. Armed men carrying blades poured out of the cars, their movements brisk and purposeful. A man in a suit, clearly in charge, ended his phone call and barked orders at his crew. "Break down the gate," he yelled. The group, nicknamed the Stupid Army, for good reason, began bashing the steel gates with bats and kicking them with all their might. After several minutes of futile effort, the men complained loudly about the gate's thickness. Furious, Mr. Suit ordered his men to bring out their big guns. However, instead of explosives or heavy weaponry, the crates they carried contained something much less impressive: wine bottles. The gang quickly turned these into Molotov cocktails, lighting them up and hurling them over the gates. The fiery bottles landed clumsily, mostly setting small fires in the yard, rather than hitting any valuable targets. Even so, the bright flames caused quite a stir. A few managed to land on the roof of the outer apartment complex, drawing attention from those inside. Shanshan, Zhang Qi, and the others sprang into action, grabbing fire extinguishers and buckets of water to contain the blaze. Thankfully, Xiaoyang had already warned them about the likelihood of attacks like this. Though the larger disaster hadn't yet unfolded, situations like these were becoming all too common. While the younger group dealt with the fires, Xiaoyang and Grandpa Shan emerged from the warehouse, armed with an assault rifle and a shotgun, respectively. They climbed up to the watchtower for a better view of the chaos outside. Once at the top, Grandpa Shan peered at the scene below and squinted in recognition. That guy in the suit, doesn't he look familiar? Pretty sure he's the one who had that road rage incident with us on the highway a few days ago. One of the thugs on the ground spotted the two figures standing on the watchtower and pointed them out to Mr. Suit. Boss, there he is. That's the guy from the road. Mr. Suit's anger exploded. Recognizing Xiaoyang, he screamed obscenities, his voice carrying loud and clear to the watchtower. You little punk, you got some nerve. Get your ass down here or I'll burn this place to the ground. Xiaoyang, calm and composed, replied coldly. You've got 5 minutes to get off my property. If you're still here after that, you won't like what happens next. The gangsters were enraged. To them, Xiaoyang's warning was nothing more than a brat's empty threat. Instead of backing down, they doubled down on their efforts, hauling out 2 more crates of Molotov cocktails to negotiate their way in. Suddenly, Xiaoyang's system sent him a new task. While Grandpa Shan was stressing over whether they should fire a warning shot, Xiaoyang was busy reading the mission details. The task was straightforward. Eliminate the threats as quickly as possible for a reward of 10 points. The generous reward quickly dispelled any notion of firing warning shots. These intruders were no innocent bystanders. They were criminal gangsters, causing chaos even before society had fully broken down. Their reckless use of Molotov cocktails could have easily burned someone alive. Xiaoyang believed that leaving scum like this alive during the apocalypse would only lead to more harm for innocent people. With that thought in mind, he made his decision. Without warming, he steadied his aim and pulled the trigger. The first bullet tore into Mr. Suit's arm, stunning him in his silence and causing him to clutch his now severed limb. The man's agonized screams filled the air, and the thugs quickly realized they had picked the wrong fight. From the watchtower, Xiaoyang remained calm on the outside, though he silently cursed himself for missing the kill shot. His aim had grown rusty after living a peaceful life for so long. The thugs, panicked by the sight of the assault rifle, scattered in dove for cover behind their vehicles. Leading the retreat was none other than their injured boss, Mr. Suit. But Xiaoyang wasn't one to let his targets escape. With a grim determination, he began picking off the retreating thugs one by one. They had rained fire on his property, so he returned the favor with lead, aiming for their chests, heads, and anything else in his line of sight. It was a brutal slaughter. Mr. Suit, driven by pure adrenaline, managed to reach one of the vehicles and scramble inside, ignoring the bleeding stump that used to be his arm. He screamed at the driver to get them out of there immediately. Grandpa Shan, watching from the tower, cast a worried glance at the escaping car, but Xiaoyang showed no concern. This was why he had grabbed the automatic rifle from the armory. Taking careful aim, he tracked the vehicle's movements and unleashed a relentless barrage of high-caliber bullets. Magazine after magazine, Xiaoyang emptied his load, each shot finding its mark. Grandpa Shan observed in awe. The young man's fluid movements, aiming, firing, reloading, were a sight to behold. Even during his years of military service, Grandpa Shan had never seen such precision and efficiency. When Xiaoyang was finally done, silence returned to the area around the fortress. The fire set by the Molotov cocktails had been extinguished, and the road leading to the gate was littered with the bodies of thugs. The getaway vehicle, riddled with bullets, had broken down entirely. Everyone inside was lifeless. Their escape attempt was cut short. Without missing a beat, Xiaoyang turned to Grandpa Shan. Call Zhangqi and the others, he said. Have them come out and clean up the mess at the front door. But as he watched the scene below, a new idea formed in his mind. It was still the early days of the apocalypse, and this incident could be used to their advantage. Instead of disposing of the bodies, he could allow them to mutate into zombies. This would create practical combat scenarios to help Zhangqi and Shan develop their fighting skills. With a faint smirk, Xiaoyang revised his instructions. Leave them where they are. We'll use this for something more productive later.